I never thought it would apply to me, but it turns out I'm at the center of it all. Expect an unexpected ending. I always believed the small things told you more about a person than any big confession could. A pause before answering, a glance at the clock when they thought you weren't watching, the sound of a laptop snapping shut half a second too late. That Saturday started out as normal as it gets. Hot dogs, sunburn, and my son's little league game. But by the time we got home and I heard that soft thud of Cindy closing her laptop in a rush, something in me snapped awake. I caught the end of a tab before it disappeared. Meeting confirmed. Room number. And though she laughed it off with a flirty grin and said it was a surprise for our anniversary, I noticed her eyes didn't fully match the smile. They twitched, just barely. We weren't the perfect couple. Who is? But we were solid, or so I thought. That night she poured wine like everything was normal, but my head kept replaying that glimpse. I didn't push, not right away. But the next day, the iPad we always shared suddenly had a new password. Cindy brushed it off, said there was a weird update, and she'd set something up by accident. Only she didn't tell me what the new code was, and something about the way she changed the subject made my stomach twist. A week later, something else rattled loose. I was cleaning out her car. She always left coffee cups and snack wrappers all over. And tucked behind the driver's seat was the crinkled plastic of a pregnancy test wrapper. She hadn't mentioned anything, and we'd both agreed years ago that 2 kids were enough. She'd even said she was on hormone therapy now, that pregnancy was out of the question. I held the wrapper in my hand for a long minute before she walked out of the house and saw me. Her explanation was quick. It's for a friend, but her voice trembled at the end. Not enough to scream guilt, but enough to whisper it. That night, I ordered a tiny, motion-sensitive camera, disguised as a smoke detector, and mounted it above the hallway, just in case. A quiet insurance policy. Days passed with nothing major. Normal dinners, normal chores. Her phone was always upside down, and she'd hum when cooking like she used to. But something was off. I couldn't shake it. Then one night around 2 a.m., I woke up and realized she wasn't in bed. The sheets were cold beside me. The kind of cold that meant she'd been gone a while. Through the bedroom window, I saw the faint blue glow of her car dashboard still lit up. I crept outside, barefoot on the stone path, and stayed just out of her line of sight. Inside the car, her laptop was open on the passenger seat, and she was whispering into the screen. I couldn't hear every word, but what I did catch was enough. He suspects nothing. I just need to hold on a little longer. Her tone was soft but confident, like someone counting the final hours of a plan that had already been set in motion. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. Pancakes for the kids, a kiss on the cheek, and she even handed me coffee with that same disarming smile she always had. But it didn't feel the same. It didn't land the same. I took the coffee, thanked her, and started quietly preparing for what came next. I bought 2 voice recorders. One slipped deep into her car trunk where she kept her gym bag, the other hidden under the drawer of her vanity inside our bedroom. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about clarity. I needed to know who I was sleeping next to. 3 days later, I listened to the first set of recordings while sitting in the garage with the engine off. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the cold truth that buzzed through my headphones. Once we're in Georgia, I'll finally feel like myself again, she told someone. The kids will stay with him. He won't fight. He's too soft. I paused the recording and stared at the garage wall, the old paint chipped where we'd once hung up paper ghosts for Halloween. That same night, I acted like nothing was wrong. I handed her wine after dinner. She loved red blends and made a joke about how tired I was. When she went to shower, I took her phone from the counter, plugged it into my laptop, and copied everything. Photos, screenshots, a message thread with someone saved as Jay, where she wrote, "I'm pretending to be a wife just to get a roof over my head." That line hit harder than I expected. The next day, I planned a movie night for the kids. Popcorn, pizza, everything they loved. While they laughed at the screen, I quietly took Cindy's passport and all her bank cards and photographed every detail. I didn't tell myself what I'd do with them yet, but I knew I'd need them. Something had broken, but I wasn't going to let it collapse on top of my kids. I wouldn't let them see the fault lines until I was ready to show them the whole map. And Cindy wouldn't even realize I was the one holding the map until the road ahead disappeared right beneath her feet. Cindy's lies had a strange rhythm to them, like she'd rehearsed the same lines so many times that they rolled off her tongue without a stumble. But she hadn't counted on someone watching from behind the curtain. I kept playing the recordings in pieces, only a few minutes at a time, so I wouldn't miss anything buried in the whispers and laughter that weren't meant for me. Most of it was small talk with her lover, but the parts that mattered snapped into place like teeth on a locked door. She was planning to leave, move to Georgia, start a new life with someone else. And somehow she had convinced herself that I'd let the kids stay behind, like forgotten luggage. What got me most wasn't the betrayal. That word barely scratched the surface. It was how easily she talked about handing off her family like an old coat. No tears, no guilt, just calm logistics. I spent the next few days pretending to be the same clueless husband she thought I was. I cleaned the gutters. I fixed the loose drawer in the kitchen. I even brought her flowers one afternoon, and she looked genuinely confused, like the kindness threw off her balance. That same night, while she took a nap, I connected a GPS tracker to the charm bracelet I had given her last year on our anniversary. She still wore it, probably because it made her lies look more believable. Tracking her movements gave me an eerie window into the other side of her life. She'd say she was going to yoga, but her car would sit outside a downtown apartment complex for 2 hours. Another time, she said she was shopping for groceries, but the GPS placed her by a public park near the old train station. Alone, just sitting there for over an hour. I didn't understand that one, but I saved the location and date anyway. I started copying her phone messages every other night, keeping a flash drive hidden in my sock drawer behind the loose board. Every snapshot was another confirmation, another nail in the coffin of the story she had built around us. One message caught me off guard. "He's getting suspicious. I might have to speed things up." My heart pounded in my chest as I read it over and over. I thought I was being careful. Had I given something away? The next day, I made things look even more ordinary. I picked the kids up from school early and took them out for ice cream, then brought them home and played board games while dinner cooked. Cindy walked in, arms full of grocery bags, and smiled like nothing had changed. That night, I made sure she had an extra glass of wine, just enough to make her lower her guard. As she showered, steam curling under the bathroom door, I unlocked her laptop using the face scanner while it was pointed at her Facebook profile. Inside, the secrets ran deeper than I'd imagined. She had separate folders. One was filled with screenshots of flight confirmations. Another had love notes written in Word docs. And a third had what looked like financial spreadsheets. I didn't open everything right away, just copied all of it to another flash drive and slipped it into my wallet. 2 days later, I set up another evening at home. Kids, snacks, cartoons. While Cindy texted on the couch, I walked out to the mailbox pretending to grab something and called our bank from the side of the house. I started laying the foundation to split our accounts, getting every legal answer I needed before making the real move. That night, I barely slept. I kept waking up expecting her to whisper more secrets in her sleep. But she didn't. She just lay there peaceful, like nothing was broken. The following week, I booked an appointment with a notary under the pretense of updating my will. I needed a professional paper trail, something that proved I was thinking about the kids first. Then I did something harder. I made a fake pediatrician appointment for our daughter and told Cindy she had to take her. It bought me 3 hours alone. While they were gone, I drove straight across town to a private law office a buddy had recommended, a firm that handled messy breakups quietly and fast. I laid everything out: emails, recordings, location data, financial records. The lawyer sat in silence, listening, then finally looked up and said, "This isn't going to be easy, but it's winnable." I drove home just before Cindy returned, but on the way back I saw her car. It was parked outside a familiar house, John's place, her old boyfriend. I pulled into a side street, turned off my engine, and waited. 15 minutes later, they came out. No rush, no guilt. Just two people laughing as they walked to her car. She kissed him before getting in. Not some weak little peck. This was something deeper. Something that told me this had been going on longer than I dared to guess. I didn't confront her. I didn't even flinch when she walked through the front door that evening with a "sorry I took so long" excuse. I just nodded and said dinner was ready. She sat down smiling, sipping wine while the kids talked about school. And when she asked to borrow my phone because hers had died, I handed her an old iPhone with a clean slate. She barely looked at it before walking into the other room. Later that night, when she was asleep, I uploaded every photo I had copied to a private cloud account under a fake name. Insurance. Not for me, for the truth. Because Cindy still thought I was asleep at the wheel. But what she didn't know was that I had both hands on the wheel now, and I wasn't taking my eyes off the road ahead. By the time the air turned crisp and the leaves curled along the sidewalk, I had already built the foundation for what came next. Cindy had gotten careless, smiling wider, acting lighter, assuming I was still trapped in the fog of her lies. But while she giggled at her texts and played the part of a loving wife, I was freezing our accounts behind her back. I created a fake pediatrician appointment for our daughter so Cindy would be out of the house. She didn't question it, just grabbed her keys and left. The moment the garage door closed, I drove across town to the credit union. The notary had everything ready. We froze the joint accounts, locked down the investment accounts, and separated the trust fund into a protected file for the kids. I signed everything without blinking. I wasn't acting anymore. I was calculating. Driving home, I saw her car parked outside John's house again. Same spot, like they had no fear of being seen. This time I followed them when they left. They drove to a park just off Route 8, the one I used to take the kids to. I stayed back, engine off, camera ready. She kissed him on the bench, slow and full of meaning. I took one photo, crystal clear. Dinner that night was almost surreal. She came home claiming traffic had been bad, thanked me for cooking, kissed my cheek like she wasn't walking back into a house lined with evidence. When she asked to borrow my phone because hers had died, I handed her a wiped old iPhone. She smiled, used it without a second thought, and walked off. Later that night, I uploaded everything, photos, call logs, messages, to a private cloud. I labeled every folder, dated and backed it up. The next morning, I moved all the birth certificates and legal papers into a hidden fireproof case in the attic crawlspace. She would never find it. I cleaned the house, hung fresh curtains, even repainted the guest room. I made it look like I was just being festive. Cindy believed every bit of it. Thanksgiving was set to be perfect. Her family arriving, the house smelling like roasted turkey, everyone in their place. The kids made handmade place cards. I cooked all day. Her parents arrived early, smiling, talking about family and futures. But that night, while they slept, I plugged a flash drive into the living room TV and set everything up. Dinner started just like she wanted. Wine, laughter, clinking silverware. But halfway through, I stood up and pressed play on the remote. First came photos from old birthdays. Then a hotel reservation. Her messages, "Leave me the house." Then a photo of her and John kissing on that bench. Her voice played over the images. "He's not smart enough." Her mother dropped her fork. Her father's face turned red. Cindy's jaw tightened, then fell open. I turned to my kids and simply said, "Let's go." We left with nothing but their backpacks and my car keys. I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell. I just locked her out of the car, the accounts, the house. And that same night, I filed the restraining order, sent the copies to my lawyer, and sat with my kids on the floor of a rented apartment, watching cartoons while the world behind us started to burn. Thanksgiving night lingered like a silent storm. Cindy had stood there screaming from the porch, but the second I pulled out of the driveway, her voice vanished behind the music. The kids were quiet, their little hands clutching juice boxes I kept in the glove compartment. I didn't say much on the drive. I just kept glancing at them in the rear view, reminding myself that whatever came next, they came first. We stayed in a short-term rental on the edge of town. 2 bedrooms, simple kitchen, a clean place with locks I controlled. I kept the lights low and my phone off. The next morning, I dropped the kids at my sister's place in the countryside, a quiet hilltop home with big windows and a dog that never stopped wagging its tail. She asked no questions. She knew something was wrong just by looking at me. I promised I'd explain soon. Then I drove straight into the city to meet the lawyer. I had the photos, the recordings, and the financial documents. Everything was in perfect order. He barely had to ask questions before agreeing to take the case. We filed for full custody and emergency protection. But I didn't stop there. That evening, I walked into the building where Cindy worked. The receptionist looked surprised to see me. She had met me a few times during company events. I handed her a flash drive and told her to deliver it directly to HR. No delays. I said it politely, calmly, like a man dropping off a delivery. Inside that drive were the receipts Cindy thought she had deleted, email threads, booking confirmations, and a line-item expense report showing that the conference she'd attended last month was actually a beach resort she flew to, with John. By the next day, she was fired. That same afternoon, she appeared outside the rental. Her hair was tangled, her voice hoarse, eyes puffy like she hadn't slept. She banged on the door with her suitcase beside her, yelling my name. She screamed something about being pregnant. I opened the door, held out the paternity test kit I had mailed to her anonymously a week earlier, and pressed record on my phone. Her face shifted when she saw it. She knew. She knew I had her cornered. "It's yours," she insisted, but the results didn't lie. It wasn't mine. I didn't say anything. I just stared. When she took a step toward me, I raised the phone higher and said in the clearest voice I could manage, "Try it, and you'll be arrested." Something inside her cracked. She let out a low sob, dropped the suitcase, and ran. I didn't watch her go. I shut the door slowly, slid the bolt into place, and sat down on the floor with my back against the frame. My hands were steady, my breathing calm. 2 days later, I filed a criminal fraud report against her. The trip she took with company funds violated several clauses in her employment contract, and she knew it. I also submitted all the evidence to the local prosecutor. Her deception wasn't just personal anymore. It was financial and legal. John was called in for questioning. He denied everything, but I leaked a recording of one of their Zoom calls, the one I caught her whispering in the car, telling him he suspects nothing. The fallout came fast. Cindy's relatives pulled away almost instantly. Her family group chat removed her name. Her parents issued a cold statement to mutual friends, saying they needed space. I heard from a neighbor that even her yoga group dropped her. Suddenly, the woman who had once seemed untouchable was isolated. I didn't gloat. I didn't say a word to anyone. That wasn't the point. But I knew it wasn't over yet. People like her don't just disappear quietly. That week, I moved the kids again, this time to a private, gated camp in the mountains. The facility had security, staff on call, and plenty of space for them to play and feel free. I told them it was a vacation, a long one. They didn't ask questions. They trusted me. That trust meant everything. I came back down alone. I needed to finish the final pieces of what I'd started. I changed our mailing address. I registered a new phone number. I hired someone to sweep the house for hidden devices and added motion sensors around the property. I even changed the locks again. No detail was too small. Then, just before midnight 3 days later, the alarm triggered. I pulled up the camera feed on my phone, and there she was, climbing over the back fence in the dark, barefoot, hair wild, eyes darting. She looked nothing like the woman I had married. Police arrived within 4 minutes. She fought them at first, screaming my name, saying this was her house too, but they didn't listen. She was trespassing, restraining order still active. They cuffed her and walked her to the cruiser. I stood in the doorway, barefoot myself, sipping black coffee. My breath steamed in the cold air, and for a second, I thought about everything we had built inside these walls. But this house didn't belong to her anymore. Not the doors, not the locks, not even the name on the mailbox. It was mine. The morning after she was taken away felt unreal. The house was still, as if the walls themselves were exhaling relief. I sat at the edge of the kitchen counter, untouched mug of coffee in my hand, scrolling through security footage one last time to be sure she hadn't left anything behind. There was no message carved into the wall, no hidden note tucked under a cushion. Just silence. She'd been desperate, but not yet delusional. Still, I changed the locks again anyway, and added reinforced window latches. Then I packed a bag and drove north, deep into the mountains where my kids were waiting, tucked away at the quiet retreat I'd secured. I brought them snacks, books, and 2 pairs of walkie-talkies so they could whisper jokes from room to room. Their laughter came easily. They were healing faster than I was, unaware of how close they'd come to being used as leverage in a life that was never real. I promised them we'd go camping soon, somewhere with stars and lakes and not a single memory of their mother. That evening, I returned to the city. There was more to do. I filed formal charges: fraud, emotional coercion, misuse of funds, everything my lawyer advised. My hands didn't shake as I signed. Every signature felt like a breath of clean air after months of suffocation. I submitted the surveillance footage, the voice recordings, the phone logs. My attorney said I had built the strongest case he'd seen in years. That didn't make me proud. It just made me want to get it over with. I hadn't seen John since the last time I followed him to that bench, but the system found him. He was summoned for a deposition. I made sure to leak the right clip, just the one where she told him, "I'm just playing the wife until the timing's right." The town forums caught fire. Their friends started asking questions. I heard from a friend of a friend that John lost his job the next day. Apparently, his employer didn't want anything to do with a scandal involving stolen corporate funds and a married woman pretending her husband didn't exist. Meanwhile, I changed the kid's school registration to a neutral legal guardian, my sister. We cut off every digital trace that could lead Cindy back to us. New contact info, new emergency numbers, even new pickup arrangements with facial ID at the gate. If she ever tried to come near them again, she wouldn't even make it past the fence. But paranoia doesn't fade overnight. I started waking at 3 a.m., checking every window twice. One night, I dreamed she was standing in the hallway, arms crossed, smiling like she used to, holding our wedding photo in her hand. Only in the dream the frame was cracked, and the glass kept bleeding. I woke up sweating. No lights were on, but I still walked the perimeter of the house, barefoot on cold tile, baseball bat in hand. And then it happened again. It was just past midnight when the doorbell rang. I didn't move at first. The cameras lit up my phone. I tapped the screen, and there she was, Cindy, standing on the porch in a torn jacket, hair sticking to her face from the rain. No suitcase this time, no rage, just a dead stare. I didn't answer. She didn't knock. She just stood there. A minute passed, then another. Then slowly, she sat down on the porch like she was waiting for a bus that would never come. I called the police again. When they arrived, she didn't resist. She didn't speak. Just let them guide her to the cruiser like her body didn't weigh anything. That night, I added one more layer of defense. Private monitoring on her psychiatric evaluation. The judge approved it within 24 hours. She was now under medical watch, with restrictions on travel, employment, and custody. Her name had become a cautionary tale in town. The friends who once flocked to her backyard brunches now crossed the street when they saw her name on mailboxes. And somewhere along the line, her lover disappeared. I don't know where he went. Maybe he got tired. Maybe he saw who she really was once she had nothing left to take. I found out she was living in a trailer on the edge of town. No running water, no heating. Someone told me she started using a different name at food banks, that she kept telling people she was framed, that none of it was her fault. I didn't respond. I didn't react. The last photo I had of her was on my phone. I stared at it for a moment. Cindy on the beach, sunglasses too big for her face, smiling at someone else holding the camera. Then I deleted it. Winter came in sharp, and it came early. The city skyline dimmed under thick clouds, and every morning I walked out onto the porch with frost biting the railing and silence humming through the street. No more messages, no more surprise knocks. Cindy had gone underground. At least that's how it seemed. But I didn't let my guard down. I knew the calm was only surface deep. People like her didn't just vanish. They lurked. They plotted. I met again with the lawyer, tightening every remaining thread. We locked down the remainder of the joint estate. The court granted temporary exclusive use of the house and sole access to the kids' educational accounts. I liquidated half the shared investments and moved my portion into a trust. Everything that had her name attached was frozen. Her credit, access, privileges, all reduced to nothing but shadows in court records. That week, I filed a separate civil suit. This one focused on the corporate misuse, the fraudulent expense reports, the travel with her lover paid through fake business invoices, the personal charges masked as company events. I handed over everything to the prosecution office, and they took it seriously. A financial audit was launched. They combed through her old emails, flagged receipts, even found proof she had used my digital signature to authorize one of the trips. And then, as if she sensed the net closing, she reappeared. I had just come back from the kids' camp, dropping off a new winter jacket, some board games, and a homemade pie my sister baked. I stepped through the front door and my phone buzzed. A call. Unknown number. I let it ring out, but seconds later, a voicemail popped up. I put it on speaker and stood still in the hallway. It was her. The voice was low, ragged, almost whispering. I know what you're doing. I know you think you've won, but I'm still their mother. Then silence. She didn't scream, didn't threaten, just left that single sentence hanging in the air. I forwarded it to the police and added it to the harassment log. The officer on the case was already building a pattern of behavior. Now that she was under psychiatric monitoring, every message she left could become evidence of instability and danger. Still, something about her tone stuck with me. It wasn't fire anymore. It was something colder. 2 days later, a letter arrived. Not emailed. Handwritten, dropped in the mailbox at night. I recognized the curve of her handwriting before I even unfolded it. No envelope, no address, just my name. Inside were 4 sentences. You took my life. You turned them against me. I'm not done. You'll see. No signature. Just those words, smeared slightly, like her hand shook as she wrote them. I reported it, of course. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. This wasn't the kind of thing that ends cleanly, no matter how carefully I planned it. So I did what I always did. Prepared. I upgraded the cameras to infrared, installed sensors on every window, replaced my car's plates, rotated my routes, stopped going to the same store twice in a row. I even trained with a self-defense instructor in the evenings. If she came near us again, it wouldn't end with just words. Then just as quickly, everything went quiet again. No calls, no letters, no reports. It was as if she had finally disappeared into whatever life she had left. Her name had faded from every group. Her job was long gone, and the trailer she had been staying in was reported as abandoned. Her lover had moved states. Someone said he changed his last name. Still, I kept the house dark at night and the keys always in my pocket. I triple-checked the doors and refused to let the kids return home yet. The court date was near. Everything was coming to a head. But just before the hearing, I received a file. Anonymous sender. Plain manila envelope left in my attorney's mailbox. Inside were photographs, grainy, time-stamped, taken through a window. Me with the kids, walking outside. One of them was of our car parked near a diner. Another of me at the gas station, bending to check the tires. They weren't just watching, they were close. The final photo was the worst. Taken at night, the kids asleep in the back seat. The camera was angled from across the lot. Someone had followed us. Someone had gotten that close. I didn't show the kids. I didn't even tell my sister. I handed it directly to the police. They opened a full investigation and finally connected it. A second phone number registered to an alias Cindy had used before. She had been violating the court order in secret, circling our lives like a ghost with a grudge. The police issued a formal warning. Another violation would result in a sentence. They flagged her location, reached out to every motel and roadside shelter in the state. Meanwhile, I added another layer of protection, hired private surveillance, off the books. I wasn't just protecting my home anymore. I was protecting our sanity. Because once someone's mask falls, they don't get it back on. And no matter how much distance you put between you, you never really know how far they'll go when they've got nothing left to lose. The court date arrived under gray skies, the kind that make the whole world feel like it's holding its breath. I wore a suit that hadn't left the closet in 3 years, and my hands felt heavier than usual as I buttoned it. The courthouse lobby buzzed with footsteps, murmured conversations, and the scent of polished wood. I wasn't nervous, I was focused. The thick folder under my arm wasn't just evidence, it was everything. Every step I took had led to this. She arrived late. Cindy entered the courtroom alone, her hair tied back like she was trying to look composed, but her eyes gave her away. They were wild behind the calm, scanning for sympathy in a room that had none left for her. I didn't look away when our eyes met. I didn't flinch. I sat upright, silent, while the judge read the charges and the restraining order violations, line by line. Her attorney tried to soften it: mental stress, temporary instability, emotional confusion. But none of it held weight against the evidence. Her forged receipts, her late-night visit, the anonymous photos, the voicemail, the threats, the paternity test. Piece by piece, it all collapsed in front of her like a sandcastle in the rain. She didn't cry. She just sat still, shoulders curled inward, like she finally understood. This wasn't a storm she could charm her way through. The ruling came down mid-afternoon. Sole custody granted. Permanent restraining order approved. Financial compensation denied to her due to intentional marital fraud. She had no legal right to the house, no right to contact the kids, no access to joint accounts, and no standing to appeal. The judge issued a 6-month probation with mandatory psychiatric monitoring, including in-person check-ins and travel restrictions. I walked out without looking back. Outside, the air tasted clearer than it had in months. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I picked up the kids and drove out of town. The van was loaded with camping gear, a cooler of sandwiches, and a stack of folded maps marked in blue ink. We stopped at the first national park just before dusk. The boys ran through the parking lot, chasing each other with wild energy, already begging to hike in the morning. We built a fire. I let them roast marshmallows until their faces were sticky and bright. The stars came out without hesitation. I sat in a folding chair and tilted my head back, watching them blink alive. The kids curled up in their sleeping bags, snoring softly, and I stayed up just to listen to the night breathe. That moment, crickets, fire crackling, the quiet hum of safety. It felt like the first real thing in years. We stayed on the road for weeks. I kept my phone on airplane mode most of the time, using it only for navigation. We saw waterfalls that roared louder than anything I'd ever heard, climbed red rock trails that scraped our knees but made the kids feel like warriors, stayed in motels with broken vending machines and breakfast buffets that made them cheer. I let them stay up late, let them pick the radio station, let them be loud and messy and full of life. She tried once more, from a different number, a text that said, "You'll regret taking them from me." I didn't reply. I didn't even screenshot it. I walked into the nearest police station and reported it, and by morning, her parole officer had added it to her file. That was the last time I ever heard from her. Later, I learned her lover had left her for someone else. Rumors said she had been evicted from the trailer. Someone claimed she was living in a converted storage unit outside town, using a generator and washing clothes at a gas station. Her name came up once in a local online forum. Someone asked, "Wasn't she the woman from that courtroom story?" No one answered. Back on the road, somewhere between Utah and Colorado, I finally opened my camera roll. There was one last photo I had kept. Her, holding our youngest, both of them laughing, wind tangled in their hair. For a second, I let myself remember the early years, when I thought love meant forever, when I thought promises couldn't rot. Then I pressed delete. I looked out the van window and the sun was rising, spreading gold over pine trees and mountain edges. The boys were still asleep, their faces relaxed, unburdened. I drove on, not thinking of destinations anymore, just the journey. The wind tore through the windows as we rolled toward the next stop, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like something was chasing us. I felt free. That's all for now, folks. Thank you for being with me today and listened. And if you liked my story, please subscribe, hit the like button, and comment below what you think about all this, and what would you do if you were me. Also, don't forget to check my other stories in description below.